We must read the signs. We must read the signs. We must read the signs. We gotta read the signs. We gotta turn this shit around. We must turn this shit around. We gotta turn this shit around. We gotta read the signs.
Welcome, and I just came from France, where I live, and I also was in Finland last week, speaking before groups of people like you, and I have to say I always admire the energy and effort that you show to show up here and to be educated, and also, frankly, to educate me, because I'm always learning something from these events. I'm Scott Tibbs. I'm the president of the National Health Federation. And whether you know it or not, I'm your representative at Codex meetings because of all the health freedom organizations, only our organization, the National Health Federation, has the right to sit in and participate actively at these Codex Alimentarius meetings. And if you don't know what Codex is, just stay tuned and I'll explain as we go along. But what I wanted to start out with is kind of another approach, and that is to tell you that as we sit here right now, there's actually a cure for cancer that exists right this moment. There's been a researcher named Dr. Yamamoto who since the 1990s, early 1990s, he's been actually defeating cancer. He's been curing cancer cases, although he would hate me to use this word, through once weekly injections of a substance that has no side effects, and he uses thin diabetic grade needles. The substance is just 1 nanogram, 1/1000th of a gram of this substance, and given over a 30 to 60 week period, it depends. And he gives it to breast cancer patients or subjects, he gives it to colon cancer subjects or patients, gives it to prostate cancer patients, and he's never had a failure, not one. And this has not been going on since last Tuesday, so it'd be easy to say no failures. This has been going on since 1991, 1992. So no failures, very few side effects, definitely no side effects actually, very definitely cheaper than the usual cut, poison, or burn technique that others use, that conventional approach. And it's just costs maybe about $10,000 US for a course of treatments. The problem is that he's only, and what you'll hear if you research this, is that he actually, it's not commercially available except maybe in a Mexican clinic or so, but there are ways to mimic the substance. And the substance is called GCMAF. The MAF stands for macrophage activating factor. Everyone in this room, you seem to all be healthy, has 2 immune systems. You have the innate immune system, you have the acquired immune system. And the innate immune system, the one with the macrophages, is your first responder to the scene of any problem you have, like a pathogen, a virus, a bacteria, a cancer cell that's going crazy. And the macrophage, here's a photo of a macrophage actually eating a cancer cell. But the problem, the reason that we have cancers in this world, is because the macrophage system cannot always defeat a cancer cell, because cancer cells exude this enzyme called nagalase, and the enzyme deactivates the macrophages and stops them in their tracks. So what this very clever Japanese researcher discovered is that by giving this injection of GCMAF, excuse me, it's like reinforcements for the army, and it overwhelms the defensive system of the cancer cell, which then encourages all the macrophages to do exactly what you're seeing in this photo, that is, eating up the cancer cell. That's one reason it works. The other immune system that we have, the acquired immune system, is one that you get by getting childhood diseases, and then you get antibodies, or you get a vaccination, or something, or in that manner you create an antibody. The problem is that the conventional approach, the alternative to what I just showed you, it kills. Now I'm using US statistics here. I'm sorry, I don't have Swedish statistics, but there'll be something on the same order of magnitude. So in the US you have about 800,000 deaths, actually more than that, per year from properly licensed, medically approved doctors, medical board approved doctors. And then you'll have another 127,000, I just put it down a little bit lower, but on average it averages out to about 127,000 deaths per year from properly approved, prescribed, or over-the-counter drugs. Just ibuprofen alone kills 17,000 Americans a year taking ibuprofen, the over-the-counter, headache reliever. And then from ordinary food, you'll get another 5,000 deaths a year. So keep this all in mind as we go through this, what I hope to be a conversation between us and among us about Codex and about the European Union's Food Supplements Directive, about the hype over the swine flu virus and the like. So these are the figures. In America alone, you have almost 1 million people a year being killed by all these properly regulated, supposedly properly regulated professions, hospitals, doctors, and drugs. Now, I don't expect you to see this, this chart. It's really more for the visual effect. It's even hard for me to read it from here, but at the very top, the line that goes farthest to the right is telling you the number of deaths, and these are all the risks relative to dying compared with a flight in a Boeing 747. So down up at the top, are the risks associated with drugs and with properly approved doctors and the like. Just below it is the risk from dying from smoking, your smoking risk. As you go on down, there are risks of dying from doctors and the like, the rate of dying. So just imagine, go to the very bottom, and that's really where I want your attention to be relative to the rest. And the very bottom item is your risk of being hit by a meteorite. You're walking around and your risk of dying from being hit by a meteorite. Just above that is your risk of dying from taking a vitamin or mineral supplement. That's how low it, just above that is your risk of dying from a bee sting or a lightning strike. So your risk of dying from taking a vitamin supplement in Sweden or the US or Great Britain or Finland or wherever you might be is somewhere on the order of between being hit by a meteorite or being struck by lightning. That's how dangerous it is. And yet all these medical authorities are trying to suppress dietary supplements and other natural remedies like homeopathy and other things because of this huge risk that they pose. And they always tell you, and they'll tell you till they're blue in the face, that they're doing this to protect you from yourself. But in reality, what they're really doing is they're trying to protect their business. They're trying to protect you from the competition. So natural products are very, very safe. In the US, again, during a 23-year period, they could only account for somewhere on the order of about 10 deaths from vitamin supplements, and even that's questionable. The wildest claim says 75 during a 23-year period. So again, far safer than being stung by a bee, being hit by lightning, or falling off a horse while you're horseback riding. And homeopathy is even safer. Martina will tell you that herself. She's a homeopath. But the side effects are virtually non-existent, and the efficacy has been proven over quite a period of time. So we have something where natural remedies work, and they've been shown to work, and they use natural substances that, for the most part, natural substances that we've grown up with or evolved with over millennia. In this case, GCMAF may not fit exactly that bill because they synthesized and extracted it to make a very concentrated source. But it is very effective for AIDS and for cancer. What I told you about it working on cancer applies equally to working for the HIV virus. Then you have a substance like ionic silver, colloidal silver, which is just a silver ion in suspension. And that is very effective for killing viruses and bacteria and gram-negative pathogens. You either take it topically or you take it orally. You know, this is the same sort of thing that they give to newborn babies in their eyes to prevent blindness, so it's incredibly safe. just as long as you take it within limits. Selenium is very important for helping prevent AIDS infection, attacking viruses and the like. You find it very hard to get in a typical Swedish diet unless you eat macadamia, unless you eat Brazil nuts. And otherwise, the soil in Sweden is very deficient in selenium. Most of the soils in Northern Europe are deficient in selenium. So to get it in your diet, you either have to get it from food products that come from the US or Canada, the central part, or you eat Brazil nuts, or you take it as a supplement, about 200 micrograms per day. But the real winner in this whole list, if I may say, besides the GCMAF perhaps, is the natural vitamin D. This is something that really mimics that GCMAF for a large part, and it hypes up your immune system to make it stronger, to make it resistant to the flu, to make it resistant to cancer. They found that women who take adequate levels of vitamin D, and again, I'm talking natural vitamin D, not the synthetic form. You want the vitamin D3, not the synthetic form D2. And by the way, I'm here, I don't work for a company, we're a consumer organization. I buy these things just like you would. So I'm not here because some company sent me here. I'm here because I really believe in these products, and I've taken them myself over the years. But natural vitamin D, which is very hard to come by in Sweden this time of year, even if you eat fish, is vitally important, because this is what protects your, gets your immune system going to protect you from the flu. So if you're interested and you're here because you're worried about the influenza virus or anything of that sort, this is one thing you want to be sure to take. Magnesium, omega-3s, oils for combating depression is important. And believe it or not, resveratrol, the active ingredient, and one of the active ingredients in red wine, is very important as well. But if you get it from a bottle of red wine, you need to know that within 24 hours of opening that bottle, the active ingredients are all disappeared unless you put it in a refrigerator. Then you have about 3 days. So you can probably get about 1 milligram of resveratrol. But resveratrol has been shown to actually reset your genetic switches to a more youthful fashion. In other words, as we get older, some of our genes turn on and then others turn off. And resveratrol has been shown, and I've even seen the gene array studies myself done at the University of Wisconsin in Madison in the United States, where I saw the mouse tissue studies that they did that showed all the genes that had been flipped to a more youthful state. And it was incredible. Resveratrol does that, as does calorie-deficient diet, but then you just seem to want to live longer, I guess, or it seems like life is longer if you don't have food to eat. So I recommend resveratrol over the calorie-restricted diet. The problem is all these things do things that the drugs do, or don't do quite as well. The drugs are not quite as good. But so the big pharmaceutical companies that have a lot of profits are making from this, they want to suppress these alternative therapies, whether it's homeopathy, whether it's dietary supplements, or whether it's Reiki healers, you name it. They are interested in it, and they have a big campaign in the press and lobbying groups to convince the world that they don't need any of these things. But how do they really work? In a true free market, it would be our ideas of what we want competing against their ideas, and whichever most interested the consumer would win out. But when they see that we're winning, which we are actually, then they do the time-honored tradition of running to the government to get laws passed or regulations passed to suppress the competition. You see this in the United States, you see this in the European Union, you name it, that's what they do. So how do they do that? They use government agencies. So if you think, and one of my main messages to you tonight is if you think government agencies are working on behalf of you, you're wrong. They don't. They work on behalf of the companies that captured them. There's a whole theme behind this that was popularized, wasn't popularized, but at least was mentioned by a very deep thinker in the US about 45 years ago who said, you know, this is what happens. the agencies that are meant to regulate these particular industries end up getting captured by the very agency, very industry members that they're intended to regulate. I mean, just think about it. For the Swedish Food Agency, I mean, that's only a small part of your life, you know. You have other things to do. You go shopping, you have school perhaps, you have your work, you have family, you go on vacation, you have to deal with your automobile, maybe there are automobile issues, I don't know, maybe taking the subway, other things, art, painting. But for food, even though it's important, it's really just a small percentage of your life and a small percentage of your focus. But for a drug company that's going to have its drug approved, that can make the difference between life and death for that company. So that's why in the US, they spend $6 million each and every day to lobby the US congressmen and women there and to lobby the agencies because they want to make sure that their products are still on the market. And most of these smaller natural companies that sell, say, natural vitamin D, well, they don't have a patent on it, so they can't protect their little market niche. Once they get approval by any agency, then anyone in this room could go and sell it. So the financial incentive isn't the same. They don't have a monopoly over a particular drug, like Prozac, or a drug like ibuprofen had a patent for a long time. They don't have a patent over that. So they want to protect their market niche, and they do this by capturing the agencies themselves. So truth number one, I would say, is that these agencies don't work for you. You may think they do, but they work for commercial and financial interests that they are supposedly to regulate. So these agencies become a tool for eliminating competition. And in my experience, I've only found that they will be responsive to the public if there's a concerted, a concentrated effort by a group of individuals working intensely together to put pressure on them. Then and only then will they respond to you. And excuse me while I take a sip of water here. We come to the ultimate prize that they like to capture, because these agencies in all these different countries represent a lot of money, time, and energy and effort. And it's kind of difficult to run around to all these different countries and capture them. And so why not go to the ultimate prize, which is the big daddy, which is Codex Alimentarius. The Codex Alimentarius Commission, how many of you know already what Codex Alimentarius is? Could you let me know so I know whether I'm okay? Well, most of you, she has her arms folded, so she's hedging her bets. But most of you do know. But just to help some of you who don't, this is an international body that was created under the auspices of the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Health Organization to create international standards, and actually had, well, maybe I'll get to that later, but it's considered to be a template for the creation of other standards in other areas, not just food. But this one just deals with food, but what they want to do is that their regulations, their standards actually want to be implemented domestically, not just internationally, not just between trade. So why bother going to all these different agencies if you can capture Codex Alimentarius? There are, within the Codex Alimentarius process, there's the commission, which meets alternate years, and I go to these meetings, and I've been going to these meetings for over 10 years now. And the organization itself has been sending someone there for about 16 years at this point. And we are the only organization, as I mentioned, that has a seat at the Codex table, meaning we can talk out at the meetings. We have a microphone like this. We can interact in real time with the other delegates, and we can present papers for consideration by the committee, by the various committees. Now, underneath the commission are, at this point, about 27 different committees, and these committees deal with different issues, like the Fish and Fishery Products Committee is one, and that's hosted by the government of Norway, and it meets once a year, either in Norway or a place selected by Norway. The committee that we're most interested in has a very long name and acronym called CCNFSDU, Codex Committee on Nutrition and Foods for Special Dietary Uses, and that's the one I started going to in Berlin in the year 2000, and it's hosted by Germany. The German government hosts it, which is probably the worst country to host a nutrition committee, but they do. And this is tasked with formulating a standard for vitamin and mineral food supplements and for other things, infant baby formulas and things of that sort. So these are the kind of committees, examples of the committees that are there. We also go to the Codex Committee on Food Labeling. In Canada, we go to the Codex Committee on General Principles that meets in Paris. We have a representative right now at the Codex Committee on Food Hygiene that's meeting in the US, that sort of thing. But the one that really captures our focus is the one in Canada on food labeling, because it's the one that's going to tell everyone about what you're eating. And that will be, on cans like this and tell you what's in the can. And the other is the nutrition one, which we've had knockdown, drag-out fights with the chairman there at the meeting, because we're extremely outspoken at these meetings, and they don't really care for us too much there, because we'll actually argue with the EC representative, the European Commission representative, and the American representative, the two probably worst delegates there. At least they were during the mid-2000s. Now this picture is of the FAO building where the commission meets in alternate years there in Rome. And this is a photo I took myself when I went to that meeting in July. So just to give you an idea, there's the UN flag flying over it. And inside, you'll see what it looks like. So I really want you to feel what it's like to be there. And so I'll explain a little bit more, maybe more detail than you want. But when you leave here, you should have a real feeling and understanding as to what it's like to be in these meetings, short of going to one yourself. So you see in this photo, this is the meeting hall in that FAO building that I showed you. Excuse me. And in the center, if you can spot him, is standing the chairman of the Codex Committee on Nutrition and Foods for Special Dietary Uses. A gentleman named Dr. Rolf Grossklaus, and he's the one I have a lot of arguments with on the meeting floor. He's right in the center facing us and looking our way. It looks like he has a mohawk, but he really doesn't. He just has graying hair and a shock of hair in the center, unlike me. But this was taken from our vantage point at these meetings. Usually, these meetings are very crowded. There are usually 200 or 300 delegates, and the way it works is you start with the country delegation, starting with, say, Albania in the beginning, and going alphabetically through the room to Zimbabwe. So the Swedish delegate will be there and have her chair, in alphabetical order. But usually the Swedish delegate won't speak out. Very rarely have I heard her speak out. Almost always it's the EC representative, because you're represented by the European Commission there, not by Sweden. Now, in private meetings, the Swedish delegate may or may not talk with the EC representative. I'm not privy to those meetings, so I don't know exactly what goes on in them. But in general, the EC representative will speak out. Occasionally, the other countries will speak out. Then behind the country delegates, and by the way, these are all bureaucrats. They aren't really normal people like you and me. They're people who have a job and they're interested in safety only, not in health freedom, not in whether people really get well, but protecting their job. And if someone dies on their watch, then that's a bad thing. So they have a vested interest in making sure there are a lot of rules and regulations to make sure no one gets hurt. But, what's the good of that if you live life with handcuffs on and in a straitjacket and tied up with a rope and in a closet in a room that's locked as well? What kind of life is that? You can protect people till they go to their grave, but it doesn't let them enjoy life. And that's part of the problem I see with the Codex process. They want to make people safe, but they're so exceedingly careful and cautious about it, if that's their real agenda, that they actually are ruining people's lives, and they're actually inadvertently killing a lot of people by not making available things that will really heal and not hurt them. In other words, in terms of preferring drugs over food, they're actually hurting people. even though they may save a few lives over here, they actually kill hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people on the other side of the equation. So behind the bureaucrats are the INGOs, the International Non-Governmental Organizations. And these are the people like me who go and can speak out. I mean, you have to be accredited by Codex to do it. But I'd say maybe 80–85% of these people, the INGOs, are representing commercial interests, like the World Sugar Research Organization, or the acacia gum people called A-Gum. So they're there for their own special niche market, and that's it. Only a handful, literally about a handful, represent consumers. I think Consumers International is there at some of the meetings, not all. There's an obscure Canadian-American organization called the 49th Parallel, that's the border, the parallel that divides Canada from the US. The 49th Parallel Bioconsortium Continuum, it sounds like some sort of Star Trek name. And they are there, and then the Infant Baby Formula Action Network, they go. And they're mainly interested in the infant baby formulas, of course, as you can gather from their name. So they attend these meetings, but usually we sit down with this crowd that you see of the bureaucrats down there, just slightly behind them. And then what you have also at the front in the podium are the chairman or the chairwoman and the staff around him or her, and including usually a representative of the FAO and a representative of WHO. And then occasionally, but very rarely, you do have members of the public that attend. You could actually go in and sit in on a meeting. You couldn't participate, you could just observe, but it is possible. The press is almost never there. These meetings are done in obscurity. So they're not things that I would say happen often, that is being reported on, other than alternative press and websites such as Bakken.se. So I would say that actually Codex is a really noble concept, but it's, and the concept, by the way, is that one, to protect consumers' health, that's noble. The second thing is to facilitate free trade, to remove all international trade barriers to the sale and distribution of food. That's also noble. But it's really an elitist agenda that they're pushing here. And it's not pro-natural remedies, it's really anti. And it's pro-drug instead. And it's all about control. It's all about top-down, giving orders to people and consumers as to what they can do and what they can't do. But one of the most dangerous things, actually, is even if we're a good system, it's very slow to react to change. And with the doubling time in knowledge, with the knowledge of humans increasing logarithmically, at least geometrically, by the time they passed a standard that's taken them 5 years to pass, we're already into the 22nd century, just about. I mean, they're still debating the gas standards, the gas lighting standards, while we're doing cold power fusion. So that is a huge problem, because even with the best of intentions, even if you assume they're good people, all of them, there's a problem with the standards that they reach. They're too old and too outdated by the time they come into place. And I've seen that myself in these meetings where these people come up, some of the delegates actually, like the Canadian delegate at one time, came up with the latest information, but it was all basically shouted down because it wasn't from the FAO, WHO, which had that had come out about 5 years ago. So this woman from Canada was basically told, forget it, even though she had information from this year. And so I spoke up on her behalf and said, she has the most recent information, we should be going with that. No, we can only go with FAO, WHO data, and that's it. And the problem is a lot of it's based upon junk science. It's not even good science. And when I talk about this, by the way, everything I'm saying about Codex, except the fact that it's global, could apply to the European Food Supplements Directive here in the EU and what's taking effect by the end of this next month. So be aware of it, because a lot of this, and the European Union's Food Supplements Directive, is really based upon junk, what a lot of us call junk science. You know, they apply these scientific terms of risk assessment, risk management, risk analysis, but all it really is this toxicological model applied to natural products, things that we've evolved with over millennia, you know, vitamins and minerals and natural nutrients that that should be treated differently. And that's part of the problem, because the system, the continental European system, is one that everything is forbidden except that which is allowed. And that's the exact opposite of the Anglo-American system, or at least the way it used to be, where everything that is not specifically prohibited is allowed. That's a much greater universe, so you actually have to go out and track down what's wrong, and then you allow it. So you have a lot more freedom of action. Now, this is a cartoon that shows actually how a lot of these dietary supplement companies are welcoming with open arms these Codex guidelines, because they think, the bigger ones think, we can sell, oh good, we can sell a lot of vitamins and supplements throughout the world, but they're all these kind of Fred Flintstone vitamin and supplements that are not meant to really heal. They're low potency, low dosage vitamins, and they're just good to help make you feel like you're doing something, but they aren't good for actually helping heal you or give you optimal health. So these guidelines are going to come back, what this is essentially saying, is going to come back and bite the very industry that thinks it's being helped by this. But these standards that are being created, these ones that are being created upon junk science, they not only deal with vitamin and mineral food guidelines, and they're trying to suppress the levels, the potencies of these, so that you couldn't get enough vitamin D, for example, to protect yourself from the flu. You couldn't get enough selenium to protect yourself from viruses. You won't be able to get enough, B6 or some of the other things you need to prevent birth defects. So these guidelines are coming into effect, not at the end of this year, but sometime in the near future. And then we also have the GM food labeling issue. This is a critical thing that we've been fighting in the Canadian meetings, and this is where actually at this stage the EC representative and the NHF representative, us, work together, because we want the consumer to be informed about genetically modified food if it's in a container. We think the consumer should know whether it's GM food or not. Unfortunately, the Canadian, the American, the Mexican, the Argentinian, the Costa Rican, the Australian and New Zealand representatives think you shouldn't be informed. They think the consumer is too stupid to understand the difference between GM food and non-GM food, and they think you'll make a mistake. In fact, the American representative told me herself, she said, the consumer is too ignorant to know the difference, and they'll make the wrong choice. They'll think GM food is bad for them. So that's why she says she's fighting to oppose GM food labeling, so you won't know. But actually the real reason is, of course, that they're controlled, they're captured. All of these, what I call the Western Hemispheric states, except for Brazil, they export grains, you know, all these GM foods, corn and soybeans and the like, to the rest of the world, and they want to protect their market niche. They want to protect their GM food crops from being stopped at the European Union's borders or in African countries or Asian countries or the like. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of these countries are wise to it, the European community being one of them. And even Zimbabwe, as poor and as starved as it was refusing GM soy products that were being donated to it, and perhaps for good reason. I won't go into the debate on GM foods, but it's not important other than the fact that the consumer should be informed, in our opinion, should be informed and should be able to make an informed choice. So that's another thing that we're fighting for. But at the Codex level, there are certain agencies that don't want this to happen. But interestingly enough, the last two items on the list, the NHF is the only one fighting to eliminate aspartame and aluminum-containing food additives from food. We're the only ones. This committee meets in China, in Beijing, And I argued till I was blue in my face that aspartame is dangerous. They all were too polite to laugh, but essentially laughed. And then melamine, I don't know how much you know about melamine, but this was the food contaminant, I would call it, that was added in by the Chinese to beef up their protein content in pet foods. And you may have read the story about a year or so ago, 2 years ago, where cats and dogs in Canada and the US were dying because they ate this food and it was poisonous because it had melamine in it. Because for a few pennies, a few centimes, they could add melamine in, and then when it was tested, it showed a very high protein content. Oh, this must be good. It has a high protein content, what we need for cats and dogs. And then they had to withdraw it from the market, of course. And then the same with infant baby formulas. The Chinese were putting it into infant baby formulas as well, and it was hurting, and in some cases killing infants. So at the Codex Committee meeting on contaminants in food, they want to set a level for contamination that we think is quite high, and we were the only ones to speak out against it. Everyone else thought these high levels were fine. So this is a big mystery to us, so we are battling on your behalf and on our own to fight these high levels. We think it should be zero, actually, because you actually deliberately add melamine in. It's not like a packaging contaminant that then causes this problem. You have to deliberately want to add it in. So at the most recent meeting, this is one that was just literally 14 days ago, there in Dusseldorf in Germany was the Codex, the CCNFSDU meeting. If you remember your acronyms, you'll remember what that stands for. And this was actually a museum, and as I said in an article I wrote on it, it's where every art is revered except that of gastronomy. And this is the inside, a little bit smaller room than the other one. And this was at a working group meeting that was held on Halloween Day, actually, and then it led into the regular meeting that followed in the full week after. So I don't know if you can read this or not, but this is a particular document that was pushed at this meeting, and we had a huge victory. So I'm happy to tell you about this victory. It may not seem like much, but it actually means a lot. And the victory is this. This document was circulated around, and this document being, I have to take off my glasses for this, sorry. Proposed draft additional or revised nutrient reference values for labeling purposes and the Codex Guidelines on Nutrition Labeling. Well, that'll put anyone to sleep. But, you know, bureaucrats love this kind of wording. And anyway, within it, they have something that's very important. They have a list of vitamins, the main vitamins and minerals, and then they have what would be the nutrient reference value. And what this means is basically the recommended daily intake. This is when you look at a label on a food, if you look at a label on a food, many people don't, but there are enough who do, and it says vitamin C, 60 milligrams, 100% of your recommended daily intake. This is what you're looking at, and this is what concerns nutrient reference values. So these morons, oh, I'm sorry, I'm insulting morons. These people wanted to reduce, in this case, vitamin C, the nutrient reference value, what would be deemed to be 100%. They wanted to knock it down from 60 milligrams to 45 milligrams because they thought 60 was too much. Well, you know, someone was smoking outside as I entered this building, and just that one cigarette will destroy, in the average typical cigarette, 60 milligrams of vitamin C. So if you're a smoker and you smoke one cigarette, you've destroyed 60 milligrams, which is the minimum amount here, what they consider to be the recommended amount. Well, this is ridiculous. You need far, far more than 60 milligrams a day for optimal health. 60 milligrams is what sailors would take to keep from dropping dead of scurvy at sea, not what keeps you healthy and free from disease. You actually probably need about 10 times, 100 times that amount, excuse me, to be safe and healthy. But even that low amount of 60 milligrams, they want to drop down to 45 milligrams. Then they want to chop niacin from 18 milligrams to 15. Vitamin D doesn't have a value yet, so that's still up in the air. They wanted to reduce magnesium from 300 milligrams down to 240 milligrams, which is also ludicrous. But get this, on the back page, nope, don't have the back page. The back page is fluoride, and they wanted to have it at a high level, 3.5 milligrams. Well, fluoride's a poison. It displaces selenium in your body. So yet they're perfectly content to keep fluoride in here. You'd think they're up to something if they're trying to do this. So this was going to sail through the committee, and there was a small protest, very minor protest from Costa Rica that just said, well, we think the value on vitamin A is too low, because for vitamin A, they have dropped it from 800 micrograms to 550 micrograms. And so Costa Rica made a little comment like that, which would mean nothing, actually. The committee would ignore it. The way it works is, unless you're persistently vocal, you can't stop anything. So you have to be persistent about it. And so just saying, oh, this doesn't look good to me, and then being quiet won't stop a document like this from going through the process. And by the way, there are 8 steps that they go through. So this started at step 1, and it was at step 2 or 3. And as it goes through the step process, the language gets more and more fixed, set in stone, set in cement, and you can't change it. So it was really important to stop the process right then and there before it got too far along, and all these values were fixed and set in stone. So I had the floor after Costa Rica. And I think, well, actually, there were a few other delegations that might have spoken first, because the countries get to speak first, then the INGO. So I had to wait patiently, or rather impatiently, while these other 2, maybe 3 delegations spoke. And then it was my turn, and I said, basically, I really wanted to say something much harsher, but I said, these figures are outrageous. This is ridiculous. It's going to make the Codex Committee look like fools and idiots because of this, and it'll be a public relations nightmare for Codex, because I knew the chairman didn't like Codex to look bad. He wants Codex to look good. That's why they spend a lot of money promoting Codex and doing videos and films on it, because they know organizations like ours are speaking out against the Codex process, at least the way it's being pushed now. Anyway, I said these figures are way too low. 60 milligrams should be raised, not lowered. And so I kept pushing on this. The Australian delegate then took the floor after me, and we ended up having a duel, verbal duel. And she said, well, these figures are what FAO and WHO has worked out. And so we should stay with them. And besides, a little to have this gives us an extra degree of comfort, you know, an extra degree of protection is what she's talking about. Anyway, to make a long story short, this argument back and forth went on for a considerable period of time. I got a little support, believe it or not, from the Iraqi delegate, who was very nice. He chipped in, but it was his first meeting, so he didn't say too much, just something short. And then the chairman actually said, well, because he sensed how much I was fighting on this, and surprised me by saying, well, maybe we should hold this document back. So I was sitting there, you know, praying to God with crossed fingers, saying, well, I hope no one says anything against this, but sure enough, there were others speaking out against it. And then I spoke again. I probably spoke out on this topic about 10 times during those exchanges. And they got tired of hearing me. I think he was finally, excuse me, I think he was finally very frustrated. He said, let's hold it back. And then fortunately, India, God bless their soul, took the floor and said, we agree with NHF, we think it should be held back. And that's all it took for the chairman. He said, we're going to hold it back, boom. And so he held back the document. So we'll have the battle next year, in a year's time, when we meet again in Chile. But at least we stopped this document this time, and we'll have a chance to build our alliances and to come up with science to refute this kind of idiot science. Because when you think about it, it may not seem like a big thing, but when the average person goes out and looks at a label and says, I'm getting 100% of my vitamin C, what is he or she really doing? They're getting a small portion of what they're they think they need. So instead of eating a healthy diet, they're getting a very unhealthy diet, because then they think it's fine to then go drink their Coca-Cola, to eat their McDonald's hamburger, or whatever they do, and not get adequate intake of nutrition, to get a nutritionally non-dense diet. So again, on the screen are some documents that the Codex puts out. But they also have a strategic plan, and there are people out there who believe it, that say, well, Codex is only to be applied internationally. Well, actually, it's already to a large extent being applied within certain countries, including the EC, because the vitamin and mineral food supplements guideline was modeled after the European Union's food supplement directive. That's why the EC representative was fighting so hard to get it just right, the Codex one, because he wanted it to be just like the European Union's food supplements directive. But it will still, I wanted to show you this, because this is actually the Codex strategic plan, the latest one that they put out for the years 2008 to 2013. And in it, they actually, and you probably won't be able to read that, but they actually mention that they will apply Codex domestically. They say in here, and I'll just cut to the chase, the Commission will develop internationally agreed standards and related texts for use in domestic regulation and international trade in food. And that continues to say that are based on scientific principles and the like. So their agenda is to actually create these standards that will then be applied not only internationally, but in Sweden and the United States and the like. And what they want to do is dumb down the levels of vitamin mineral supplements to a level where it will not help you. And here again is some other language in that same book that I just showed you. So a lot of you are already familiar with what's going on here in the EU. This is written maybe more for an American audience, but the European Union's Food Supplements Directive started taking effect July 31, 2005, and it's finally being fully implemented at the end of December next month. So what we have is a situation, and you're seeing this in Sweden, because the most liberal countries that I've seen in the European Union for selling supplements and natural alternatives is Ireland, Great Britain, the Netherlands, and Sweden. You know, the harshest are like Denmark and Norway and Germany. France too, to a large extent, although they usually just ignore the rules and regulations there anyway. But what it does is, as I said, it matches these European Union Food Supplements Directive, matches the Codex Vitamin Mineral Food Guidelines. Not entirely, but pretty closely. And the goal, again, is to suppress natural remedies that you would be interested in, that would actually heal. In the US, there's a lot more freedom, there's a lot more protection, and that's courtesy of this first legislative item that's mentioned there, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, passed 15 years ago, and basically took away the arbitrary powers of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to just go in and remove whatever products it wanted. Once that happened, it didn't mean that the market was unregulated, which is what you're going to hear. Oh, the unregulated market in the United States. Well, that's false and wrong, and they know it's wrong, because there are all sorts of laws in effect to protect consumers. If you lie about a product, if you cheat, if you misbrand it, if you don't tell the truth about what's in that product, you can be put in prison, basically. Fined, put in prison, sent off to jail, and the like. It's definitely regulated, but it's just not regulated the way the power seekers want to regulate it, with total control. So the beauty of Deshay was that it unleashed all this creativity, all this freedom, and that's why in the US you see about 1,000 new products a year coming out in the health industry. 1,000. And in fact, so much so that actually some of the big vitamin companies that originally supported this law 15 years ago are now kind of hoping to rein it in a bit, because they didn't realize that these small and medium-sized companies would be created as competition to them. So now what they want to do is create more burdensome regulations where you have to prove all these things. You have to test all the products, even though they've been tested many times before, are the subject of studies. And that will increase the cost of entering into the marketplace and keep out all these smaller businesses. The bad law that just came into effect is the Food Safety Act of 2009, and this will give the federal government total control over the food supply, even if it's grown in someone's own backyard, and especially over organic food. Anyway, we won't take the time to go into it, but what it's all leading to is creating a North American Union, the harmonization of Canada's laws with those of the United States and with those of Mexico. It started just like it did here in Europe with an economic agreement, but it starts there in North America with the North American Free Trade Agreement. It's led into the Central American Free Trade Agreement. The Central American Free Trade Agreement specifically refers to codex in its language, which a lot of other agreements like the SPS, the sanitary and phytosanitary agreements, and the technical barriers to trade agreements refer to. And then it leads down to these tri-country working groups. MUCH is just an acronym for Mexico, United States, and Canada Health. But believe it or not, using these groups together, they're headed towards a definition of health fraud that they want to use in North America, and that also, I suspect, will be used here, and in some countries is already being used. That if you read the last line that's highlighted, says anything that basically provides a beneficial effect on health is a health fraud. And that's what they're leading to in all the member countries of Codex, is just this. And there are 182 member countries in Codex that represents 99% of the world's population. So basically, health fraud is defined as something that provides a beneficial effect on health. Can you believe that? How outrageous is that? So if you eat an apple and it provides beneficial effect on health, and you make a statement to that effect, you're committing health fraud. So truth number 2.
Was that their wording? Or?
That is their wording. That is the wording in the United States and Canada and Mexico as part of this MUCH group that they're putting into effect. So truth.
Say an apple a day keeps the doctor when you go to jail?
Yep, you could. In theory, they'd probably just warn you first. Second time, they'd probably fine you. Besides taking away all your apples. And
they can try, brother. They can try.
Good for you. They can try. But the point I want to get to is you find this problem wherever you have great centralization of power, because you think about it, who's attracted to power the most? It's not ordinary people like us. I mean, it's not basically good people, honest people. It's the power seekers. It's the one who, almost sociopaths and psychopaths that get attracted like moths to a flame to power. And the more power you have, the more concentration of power, whether it's in Brussels or Washington, D.C. or Moscow, I don't care where it is, the more psychopaths and sociopaths you have go there. And they can look like normal people, and they can talk normal language, just like anyone else, but in reality, what the people are, they're power seekers. So you want to break down the government and diffuse the power as much as possible. I mean, that was the beauty of the original concept of the United States of America, was that it was very decentralized power. The main power holders was not Washington, D.C., it was the various states. You were known as a Virginian or a New Yorker or a New Hampshire person. You were not known as an American. And in fact, once I had this funny experience when I went to university at the Sorbonne in Paris, and I went out with some other students for a coffee or tea late at night, and there was a Frenchman, an old guy with a cigarette kind of dangling off the lower lip, and he saw us over there, and he's probably attracted to the good-looking woman that was with us, and he said, sort of sneered at us, and he said, you're Americans, right? And we said, yes, we are. And he said, your country, it doesn't even have a name. And I said, yes, it does. It's the United States of America. He said, that's not a name, that's a description. A name is like France or England or Sweden. That's a name of a country. And, I started to say something, then I thought about it, and I thought, he's right. It is. It's just a description. But why is that? Well, it's because it was meant to be a decentralized government. You know, the average American, up until the start of the American Civil War in 1860, had virtually no contact with the federal government in Washington, D.C., unless he or she went to the post office and mailed a letter, and then they came in contact with the U.S. government post office. That was it. They had contact with the local government, the county, the city, or the state. That was it, because you were known as a Texan, you were known as a Californian, you were known as a Georgian or Floridian, not as an American. So that was the original concept. Now you see the United States is flipped totally on its head, and everything is centralized. That's one reason America is doing so many bad things now. You have all the power seekers going there. You have all the power-hungry people. I don't care who's the president. You have power seekers there, or the people behind them who are the power seekers running things. But they all forget that government isn't God. And this leads to the latest big hype, and I think Anna and some others were interested in this out in the audience, and that's about the swine flu vaccine, vaccinations in general, and the like. This is another agenda that's going to be pushed, is being pushed, and is going to get a lot of people sick and ill, and already has. Actually, the death rate from the swine flu is pretty low when you compare it even to ordinary flu. More people have died from ordinary flu than from the swine flu. And it's intended to scare you, and there was a big media campaign to scare you into taking a vaccination. But you're more likely to die from that vaccination than you are from the swine flu itself. But the interesting thing, and I take you back to the beginning of my talk, is all these natural remedies that could actually protect you far better from the swine flu or any flu than that. Natural vitamin D, taking 4,000 or 5,000 international units a day. That helps protect you. Taking quercetin will help you. You know, during the plague, the Black Death in the Middle Ages in Europe, there were, you know, as you know, it spread throughout Europe except for a central part of Poland, and a third of the population in Europe died off from it. But there was an interesting thing where some criminals in Marseille were caught. They were very bad guys. I think they'd killed some people, and this is actually a true story, but they were condemned to death by the judges. But the city fathers thought, you know, we can put them to use before they die. Let's have them remove the pestilent-ridden bodies from the city streets to remove them to a remote location, and they'll die from the plague within maybe a week. But what they didn't realize is these guys had as a habit of drinking a glass or several glasses of red wine, raw red wine, very crude red wine, with mashed garlic, freshly mashed garlic in it. They were drinking this every day, and it protected them from the plague. And so here they were, removing bodies day after day, week after week, month after month, still living. The police died, the judges all died off, the city fathers died. You know, all of the others were dead. They were still alive, all, you know, happy as clams because they were still alive and hadn't been put to death. And this is the beauty and the benefit of some of these natural remedies that can help you. And I won't go into all the detail here because we might run out of time, but I want to point out one thing, which is homeopathy during the big Spanish flu epidemic in 1918, 1919, actually successfully treated flu far better than the allopathic form. The death rate from people treated allopathically was 30%, but the homeopathically treated patients only died at a 1 to 1.5% rate. That is, it was 98% successful. And I'm being stopped at this stage by Leo.
Thanks.
Gardasil is another fraud. You know, this is the vaccine that's to be given to young girls, supposedly protect them from cervical cancer, even though there's only a tenuous connection between getting the injection and being protected from cervical cancer in the first place, let alone connection between the virus that's there and cervical cancer. And actually, your death rate, your chances of dying from getting the Gardasil injection, it's actually a series of injections, is 4.3 per 100,000 reported incidents versus your chance of dying from cervical cancer, which is 3.0. So which would you rather have? Risk of 4.3 from getting the injection, or 3.0 if you don't get the injection? Well, I'll go with the 3.0. But it's great for the company drug profits because it's a very expensive drug. But another fraud. So the best thing to do is protect yourself. Don't take, as the English say, the jab. The Americans would say the injection. But do take natural remedies, natural substances that will protect you. And I've already mentioned them almost ad nauseum. You know, the high-dose natural vitamin D, the vitamin C, of course, selenium, quercetin, which is a bioflavonoid, and the homeopathic remedies as well. And so these are mentioned here. Oh, also olive leaf extract is quite good. And ionic silver is very good when applied topically or even ingested. Remember truth number 3, governments lie and they do it all the time. Don't ever forget. But what you do want to remember is that freedom actually does work. Individual liberty is what I'm referring to when I say freedom, not the way they misuse the term these days. And not only is it morally superior to coercion, but it's practically superior, and I could give you examples on that. Again, we're running out of time. But the one downside, and this is one reason people run away from freedom and run to the government, is a lot of people don't want to take personal responsibility for their health. This is the biggest obstacle I've seen. They want someone else to make the decision for them. They want someone else to do the thinking for them. They want someone else to tell them what to take and do and be. That's why they believe in government working for their interests. But it's wrong. You just need to take personal responsibility. So what do I recommend doing? If you want to make change, realize that politicians don't see the light, they only feel the heat. What this means is you need to go to them and be proactive. You need to be persistently vocal. You don't just write a letter or pick up the phone one time. You write the letter, then you pick up the phone, then you write an email, then you go down and see them either alone or with your friends or family, and then you start the process all over again. You write letters to the editor, you write, if someone is writing a blog spot, then you go to the blog and write there, and if they say something to the contrary that's anti-natural remedies or anti-health freedom, then you challenge them. So challenge, challenge, challenge. But the main thing is be persistently vocal. And then also, I may have misspelled it there, but anyway, sorry if I misspelled Sweden. But you want to join with an organization to multiply your efforts there and to make sure that you get reinforced, because it's real easy when you're out there to get discouraged. When you read the daily paper or you read or see the news on TV and they're telling you how dangerous vitamins are and supplements are, you get this propaganda constantly hurled at you, and it's nice to have some reinforcement from other people that believe as you do. So, but one thing, and I quote this horrible, horrible American president named Lyndon Johnson, but I do it for a reason, because he brings up a very good point, even though he's probably responsible for JFK's death, I don't know, but anyway, assassination. He does say something good, which is what convinces is conviction. When you go to these people, you need to believe in the argument that you're advancing. If you don't, you're as good as dead. The other person will sense that something isn't there. And no chain of reasoning, no matter how logical or elegant or brilliant, will win your case for you. In other words, speak from the heart, not just speak superficially. Oh, I believe in health freedom. No, I believe in health freedom and I do it because of this. I've seen people helped, I've seen people cured, I've seen people who don't get ill because of it. And speak from your heart and speak with conviction, and you'll reciting lines that you read out of a book. So our organization, just to familiarize you with it, is the National Health Federation. We're the world's oldest health freedom organization. We're only for consumers. We do have a few health food stores who have contributed and joined, but 99.9% of our members are people like you who contribute a small amount of money for their membership, and that's it. And we've been active in fighting water fluoridation, vaccinations. We had the American Medical Association spying on us for years because of our anti-vaccine stance. And we have members in 23 countries, including here in Sweden. And again, we're the only ones with the CETA Codex, so we're the only ones that can speak out for you like we did on this document at the Codex meetings. So we have a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. We don't pay him $6 million a day. We don't pay him $6 million a year or a lifetime, but he still helps represent our interests. And we hope to have one in Brussels as well to do the same here in the EU. This was an ad, just to give you some samples of things we do. It was created in Great Britain that we use there. This is a guy that you should be familiar with if you aren't. How many people know who this is? Hi. God, I'm impressed. So usually it's like one hand or two hands. That's Ron Paul. He received, and he's holding in his hands, our Health Freedom Hero Award that we gave him about 2 years ago. And he actually was the only real candidate for the presidency that offered a real change in the last election cycle. And he ran against John McCain, but lost, of course, because the machinery was all against him, because he offered real hope and real change, and they wanted the two puppets that they controlled to run for the presidency instead, and that was McCain and Obama, whom the powers that be really control, and they didn't care who won, just as long as one of their own boys, and that's who won. But Ron Paul, you'll hear more about him in the future. He's not gone. He's just as active as ever. These are examples of documents we submit. In this case, it was kind of a letter challenging an advertising directive in the United Kingdom, so we do this internationally. And this is a book I'd recommend if you haven't already bought it. They're at the table there. It's a book that I edited, but it has articles from all these health freedom fighters who have attended and eyewitness accounts from these Codex meetings over the years. And you don't have to read the whole thick thing, but you can jump around because they're articles. They aren't done in chapter form. So it's easy to read. And we're translating into Swedish, actually, because we have here Britt Marie who's going to translate it into Swedish, so if you want to wait, you can also get it then. But I want to direct you to our website, and you sign up on our email list. And I don't know if we have a sign-up sheet there. If you did, we'll enter you anyway. But if not, or if you have a friend, go to www.dnhf.com and sign up on our email list. It's free, or you can join, which costs something, but if you sign up on the email list, we do not share or give away your name to anyone. We're actually pretty fanatical about it, and there are only 2 people in our whole organization that have access to that email list, and I'm not even one of them unless I specifically ask to go see something. And then just for those of you, I've added my own personal email address at the bottom. If you want to write me, you're very welcome to if you have a question or something comes up later. But if you do, I get so much junk mail, please in the subject line put something like NHF Sweden, and I'll know it's from someone that's not spamming me. So you're very welcome to write me with questions. I may or may not get right back to you. But we're all hanging by one hand here. That's us, and hopefully we'll hang on. But the last thing to remind you is be active. Be active in this. And as Benjamin Franklin said, a long life may not be good enough, but a good life is long enough. And so what we want is a good life. And if it's long as well, that's all the better, but at least a good life. So I thank you, and I think that is it. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I think we have more time. There's a lot I skipped over because I wanted to leave time for questions and answers. So you've been sitting with your arms folded. Do you have any questions? No, I'm putting you on the spot. Okay, but this gentleman does, the 60 milligram guy.
Now I'm just wondering about, because you implied, well not implying, you're saying out loud that it's basically controlled by corporations and such. When you started in this, has your worldview transformed a lot, and is that view representative for your organization?
Okay, so has my view transformed a lot?
Has the view of corporations controlling UN meetings and such, has that moved to other levels?
We've pretty much gone in realizing that from the beginning, because we've been around a long time. I mean, next year, January, will have been in existence 55 years, and I've only been the president 2.5 years, but I've been with the organization about more than 20 years. I'm a lawyer, I'm an attorney, and and I've been fighting for this for quite some time. At the codex level, it's only been more recently, just the last 10 years, and then monitoring it for 15 years. But yes, I mean, I can see evidence of it all around in the positions taken by the US representative, for example, the positions taken by the EC representative and the like. And I'm not saying it's monolithic. I'm not saying that all corporations are happy. You know, there's some little corporation, you know, it's just like anything. They're good and bad anywhere. And, but some of the really big corporations have joined in this sort of, and I hate to use the word because it's so overused, but sort of this fascist relationship with big government to work together. And one of the things I didn't say earlier is a lot of these bureaucrats, when they leave their bureaucracy, when they leave their agency, where do they go get a job? They get a nice cushy job with a pharmaceutical company or a big food agribusiness company, you know, at the drop of a hat. No problem whatsoever. And they'll pay them nice big salaries, and they know that. So when they're working in these agencies, they have every incentive to do the right thing by Pfizer or GSK or some of the other big drug companies, because they may very well be working for them later. And if they fight them, they won't get the job later. So most of these people are very financially interested. But yeah, I see a lot of this going on behind the scenes. It's not very overt, but it is there. I don't know if that answered your question.
Pretty much.
Okay. If it didn't, I can go on. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
This control of your food in the backyard, as in the US, is that coming to Europe as well?
Okay, you need to speak up a little bit, please.
The control of growing your own food.
Oh, the Food Safety Act? Is the Food Safety Act going to come to Europe? I think it already has to a large extent, but they'll just use it as a model. See, a lot of this is cross-pollination. You know, what the American government, the American bureaucrats see over there, from their viewpoint, they look at Europe, they say, oh, all these rules and regulations sound nice, we want them too, you know, we want them. And then in Europe, there may be a few things that Americans have that the European bureaucrats would like to have, and that could be one of them, but it would only be a small portion, because you already have a lot of it here as it is. So there's a lot more control here, and even in Sweden, but they're clamping down on Sweden very tightly, much more so than they have to in, say, Denmark or Finland, where they've already well clamped down. But you know, a lot of these people it's just driving the businesses underground, so they have a black market. That's all the black market is, whether it's in illegal drugs or supplements or homeopathy or whatever it will end up being. Someone else had a question. You do have a question, okay. All right.
I just wanted to know about the ionic silver.
Yeah, you wanted to know about the ionic silver. I'm just repeating it so people can hear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it a new recommendation to consume?
Well, is it my recommendation? Well, let me say it's not something you consume every day. You just use it when you need. And say you're on an airplane, and the guy behind you is coughing on your neck. And so I would spray it in my mouth or on my hands. You can use it as a sanitation thing, actually, and to protect myself. And you know, there's a lot of recirculated air in those airplanes anyway, so even if the guy's sitting 8 rows away, you might still want to do it. So it's not something you take every day. If you're otherwise not exposed to something, I wouldn't worry about it. If you cut your hand, it helps accelerate healing, wound healing, and without scarring, so it's good for that. Just that sort of thing, if that answers your question. Yeah, because you can, on silver, you can overdo it. You know, they parade out the poster child, the woman or the man who drank buckets of it and turned gray. You know, if you take too much, it actually turns your skin gray, but those people were, you know, drinking homemade ionic silver by literally the literfuls, and that over years. I mean, it takes a long time. It's not physically harmful. Actually, it's pretty protective. It's just cosmetically unsightly. But that's all because you look like the gray alien from Mars, you know, or from some other world. And but that's the only danger. So you don't want to just take it every day, but especially if you don't need it. But otherwise, it's harmless.
What's the difference between ionic silver and colloidal silver?
Actually, none. But shouldn't be any. But some colloidal silvers are made differently. Ionic silver actually has a small ionic charge to it, and it's better suspended than colloidal silver. But there's such a large overlap, they're essentially the same. There's a real good one I'd recommend, by the way, but he is a friend of mine, so I'll do full disclosure here. And that's at, go to silver100 with the numbers 100.com. And that's the kind I use. It's really good. It's made in Florida. They have a patent on it, and I won't go into it. You can read it on the website if you're interested, but it's a really effective form. Someone else had a question. Yes, ma'am.
I wonder, is the media interested in anything you have to say? I mean, I cover.
Is the media interested in what I have to say? Well, sometimes, but usually it's the alternative media. I've appeared on the Swedish-based Red Ice Creations. You know, they have Red Ice. They have a really good interviewing setup where they interview different people, not only me, but others. And so I've been on that a couple of times, things like that. I've been on Gary Knoll, been on some television programs, been on radio, but I have a face made for radio, so I tend to go on radio a lot more. But conventional media, I was supposed to have an interview here today, but the woman canceled out on me twice. So there are times where I do. When I was in Finland, had a number of interviews, and so that's good. But generally, no, media is not. Well, to be fair, it's partly our fault. We need a good PR person to go out and be aggressive, to be persistently vocal, like I myself am saying. So if you know a good PR person, we're ready to engage someone. So it's half our fault, but the other half is a lack of interest on their part. They think they've heard it, it rates somewhere with conspiracy theorists, you know, and that sort of thing. And so they just sort of dismiss us. Someone else? Yes. Well, how about this guy in front first?
What happened about the amalgam area in the USA today?
How about what happened to the what?
About the silver fillings.
Oh, the silver fillings. Well, had a small victory, but not a really big victory. And some people say it's not even a victory. Because as you all know, the so-called silver fillings, the amalgam fillings in people's mouths that dentists have been putting in for decades, are really mostly mercury, with some other hazardous material in there as well. So the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the United States, refused for decades to take action on it. But they finally did. They finally declared that a warning should be issued to patients. But it's a very watered down warning that basically says it's only dangerous in these certain instances, and I forget the exact details, but A, B, C, but in all other cases, it implies that it's still safe, when in fact it's not. So whether you wanted to declare that a victory or not, that happened earlier this year with the FDA calling for that warning.
Do you work with this issue also?
Yes, we do. We actually do. We've been fighting that for decades. To be honest, we've been focusing more on codex and some other legislative things, so we've kind of let that go by the side because we aren't a rich organization. You know, we're large enough, but you know, it takes money to cover everything, and there's so many things to cover, so we have to pick and choose. But yes, we do have people who have fought on that, and we have for years. Does that help answer your question? Okay. The gentleman behind you.
Do you see in the codex different health, natural health stuff that you can buy in a health shop now? Do you see it being banned completely as a commodity?
You mean vitamin and mineral supplements?
Or could you buy it, sell it under some other pretext that this herb is for skincare, or this is for? Do you see a complete ban on?
Well, you bring up. Did everyone hear that question? He was asking if Codex would ban everything, or could you bring up as a pretext? sorry, as a pretext, the same things as maybe a cosmetic or a skincare type item. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's really an excellent question. Remember that Codex Alimentarius is Latin for food code. So technically, Codex just governs food. So if it's a cosmetic, if it's for skincare, Codex won't have any control over that. However, it is a template, and it is a guide for controlling these items in other ways, in other areas. Having said that, the codex won't, part of your question that I didn't repeat was will eliminate everything. And it won't eliminate everything. There will just be lower potencies and it'll be weaker. So to get an adequate level of vitamin D, for example, you'll either have to stand in the sun in July, or you will, not other times of the year by the way, or you will have to take 80 capsules of low potency vitamin D at a very expensive price to get what you need. Right now, the vitamin D, I take 5,000 international units a day. I buy it in the States. When I go back there, I go back and forth about 7 times a year. I can buy a month's supply for €2. That's how much it cost me. But to buy the equivalent, I priced it not here, but in Finland when I was in Helsinki last week. It would cost 11 times more, maybe 20 times more, depending upon where you bought it, to buy the same amount of vitamin D and to take it each month or each day for a month period of time. So this is what regulation does. It doesn't protect you because the vitamin D I buy in the States is probably even higher quality than that I looked at in Helsinki, but it increases the price. So people who have this free medical care, would you go spend 20, 30, 40 euros for enough vitamin D when you can get this drug for €1 or maybe for free? The average person, what are they going to do? We'll take the vaccination. We won't do the thing that will cost us money. And that's a real issue too. So free medical care sounds great, but in some ways it's not great because it directs people down this pathway that they want you to be directed down. That is drugs, doctors, allopathic medicine, and away from natural care. It's a very tough choice that a lot of people have to make. A lot of times they make it in the direction of their... So having said that, maybe I lost a little track of the question, but I do see that there will erupt in the underground, in the black market, and in these sort of side fringe areas, ways to take it, because there are some people who claim you absorb vitamins through the skin. And you can to a certain extent, you just can't wash it off, wash your body for a period of time until it's truly absorbed, or fully absorbed. So, does that answer? Okay. Yes, sir.
How to deal with this issue of what you call junk science, and how to find real and good science? Because there are basically science to prove any and everything.
Well, it's a good question. How do you deal with this issue of junk science? And we deal with it kind of 2 ways, one of which you already implied in your question. That is, we try to go and find the science that is good, and then we present that to the Codex Committee. The other way is we attack their science by showing that it's junk science. Up until about 1999, the FAO actually they have what are called expert consultations. This is where they get a group of experts together, and then the experts tell us on a particular issue, like, is vitamin C dangerous? I don't know that that's one they dealt with, but I'll just pick it as an example. Is vitamin C dangerous? So they get experts from different fields, and they meet, and they go through all the science. Maybe they even conduct some studies, but usually they just refer to studies and read studies and reference them. And then they come up with a conclusion. But about 10 years ago, the FAO started abandoning that process. They're still called expert consultations, but instead of getting a broad-based, non-biased group to render an opinion, an expert opinion, they go out, they decide in advance what they want the conclusion to be. This is why I call it junk science, partly. And they say, well, Michael over there, he sides with us on this view, so we'll select him for the panel. And then Marina over there, we like what she has to say, so she's going to be on the panel, but not Anna, because she's against us. And then we'll pick, Dita over here, and then we'll have our panel, and that's their expert consultation. They've been doing that for 10 years. So the science they come up with is all warped and biased in favor of the already selected viewpoint that they have, the already selected opinion. So we point that out to them. And that's what I did at this last Codex meeting. I was attacking their science. And when I get upset as I do at some of these meetings. I get a lot more forceful and aggressive in what I say than I am here. I'm a lot more relaxed, you know. I'm not used to seeing friendly faces. I'm used to seeing hostile faces, so that kind of gets me going. So anyway, that's the answer I would give you. Anyone else?
Yes, talking about hostile faces here as well.
Talking about hostile.
Hostile faces here as well, not against you, but hostile against the
Oh,
opponents.
thank you. Yeah, well put.
So,
That's true.
Please bear with me, it might take a little time, please. The information I've picked up till now around Codex is basically coming from Dr. Ian Crane and Dr. Rima Leibow.
Well, Ian Crane is not a doctor.
Well, Ian Crane, then take it away.
Yeah, but that's not to denigrate what he has to say. I'm only here, in fact, because of Ian Crane, thanks to him.
Yeah, I know you faced due to him also.
Yeah, so it's thanks, you know, he's been quite responsible for us having as much success as we have, so I like him a lot. But you also mentioned another person who is a doctor, unfortunately, which goes to show that a degree is not a good source of anything necessarily. I think you learn more in real life than at an educational institution. So what about these two individuals? What can I...
Well, first of all, my hostile face and my upsetness comes basically from the very powerful statements that especially Dr. Rima Leibow makes concerning the consequences, the immediate consequences of Codex Alimentarius.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the amount of deaths that she claims will be a direct result of only the vitamin and mineral, what are they called, supplement consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And you being the man, you being our number one white knight defendant, I have not heard you talk in any way close to the statements that have been made by Ian Crane and Dr. Rima Leibow.
Well,
so, and I would like to really to have it recorded. That's why I'm asking, because there is one question that makes me very insecure, and that is that Rima Leibow, Dr. Rima Leibow, is married to General Stockholm, who is a former Black Ops general and PSYOPs person.
And may still be, for all we know.
May still be. And who is sitting as an owner and controller of Cytec, together with General Michael Aquino, who is an expressed Satanist, and what is his name, John Alexander, General John Alexander, who control Cytec, which is a different area that I will not go into now. But only this connection makes Dr. Rima Leibow questionable.
You want me to give you some other reasons?
Well, please, but because she's also going out so
reasons?
powerful with Alex Jones on Prison Planet.
I know. Well,
So-
she serves a good service
Thank you.
by presenting one service only, and that is raising the consciousness of people and awareness of Codex Alimentarius. But that aside, I'll give you a good number of reasons why you can't trust what she says. The first time I met Rima Leibow, yes, sir?
Who are, for the rest of us, who are we talking about?
Okay. All right, thank you for stopping me on that, because you're absolutely right. We're talking, well, Ian Crane is a British-based gentleman who goes around and points out, amongst other things, the danger of Codex Alimentarius. And he's been very good at presenting this viewpoint around Northern Europe primarily, also in the US. And we consider him a friend of NHF, by the way. One of the good guys. He is tougher in his speech about it, about Codex. And, but I try to just stick to the facts that I know, and as I present them. There are other things that I could speculate on, but I won't speculate on. Not here. I'm here to just present what I know. Then there's another individual named Dr. Rima Leibow, and she's a psychiatrist. She's given up her practice, I think, and is now just devoted towards this. About 15 years ago, she and her tall drink of water military husband, Albert Stubblebine, crash landed into the UFO community, caused all sorts of disruption there, and then left the community. Now they've crash landed into the health freedom movement about 4.5 years ago. maybe 5 years ago. But I first met them in March of 2005 at a conference amongst health freedom activists for Codex that was called by another organization, and they invited us, NHF, to be there because we had the seat at the Codex table. So they couldn't have a meeting on Codex about health freedom without us. So we were there, but I happened to meet Rima LeBeau, and I said to her, I said, you know, on your website, you have a very broad statement saying you're going to, Codex will remove all vitamin and mineral food supplements from U.S., that is American health food store shelves by July 31, 2005. I said, that's not true. It's not going to happen. You're confusing the launch date for the European Union's Food Supplements Directive with Codex. You should take it down. Because if you keep it up there, then when July 31 comes around in about, what would that be, 4.5 months, then people are going to laugh at all of us and they're going to paint us all with the same brush and say, see, all of you are fools and you don't know what you're talking about. And she looked at me and she said, no, it's true. It's going to happen. Of course, now, 4 years later, it's now November 2009, more than 4 years after July 31, 2005, I could walk into an American health food store right now and find more than I could find 4 years ago, not less. So it was clearly a misstatement. And then she changed it to now later, oh, it's December 31, 2009. Forget about July 31, 2005. Now the new date is December 31, 2009. Well, we all know that's false if you were awake while I was talking, because that's the end date, the full implementation date for the European Union Food Supplements Directive. Not anything to do with Codex. But then, in her most recent press release, or one of her most recent press releases this month, I read it. I have a hard time reading them, but I read this one. And she said in it, oh, we were successful. We pushed back the date for the implementation of Codex. See, we're getting a month and a half away from December 31, so she had to do something. We just learned that now the implementation date will be 2011, or 2013, or 2012, 2013. So, whew, we can all breathe a sigh of relief. What a clever way to get out of this, little trap she had put herself into. But the beauty of her method, from her viewpoint, is that by being such an alarmist, by sending out misinformation, it looks like she's the only one that knows anything. She's giving out all this false information, but it's like the Hitler big lie. There's some truth in there and there's some falsehood in there, but people don't know which is which. So they're choosing to believe her, and then they dismiss or they forget about the other stuff. So when it doesn't come true, so it's a real disservice. But at the same time, she's a big sink for money. In other words, a lot of people are contributing to her organization when it doesn't have a seat at Codex, when it's not doing anything real except putting out misinformation. So it's a real problem amongst the health freedom community. There's no other health freedom organization of the main organizations that supports her. They don't even want to have anything to do with her. You can name them off. Alliance for Natural Health, nothing to do with them. The Danish Health Freedom Organization, Mayday, nothing to do with them. The Norwegian Health Freedom Organization, nothing to do with them. So there are a whole bunch that won't have anything to do with these people because they know they're not telling the truth all the time. So I hope that
you went from one person to many people.
Pardon?
You're talking about Rima LeBeau and
her husband.
And her husband.
Yeah. Sorry, it's really a couple, and then there's an attorney that I've known for about 40 years who is with them as well.
There is a very serious follow-up problem with that because they are such frequent guests at the Alex Jones show, which really, to me, puts question marks. Because I personally
question marks on Alex Jones, you mean? Oh, I agree.
personally heard on an interview with General Stockholm. I'm sorry if this doesn't mean anything to other people here, but to me this is very serious. So where General Stockholm, somebody called in who was very informed on this man, said, "Are you this and that? Did you do this and that?" And Alex Jones just put him down.
Oh, really?
And he was taken away. And from that, because I felt this is not right.
Yeah.
And because for me, this is my line. I have told it for a long time. This is my line in the sand. If people start messing around with what I can eat or not, that is my line in the sand, and that is war.
I agree with you.
So, and if not war, I would like to use the word self-defense.
Yeah.
Because it is about self-defense. If somebody takes the right, what I can grow in my own garden when it comes to God's totally innocent products in my garden through my sweat.
For yourself and not
for
to sell
myself
to
and my
anyone
family.
else.
That is absolute self-defense.
Right.
And the next step is war.
I agree.
And war is about knowledge and about, so it's very, where is my friends and where is my, you know, that is, and you, maybe Sweden, we look like friendly people, but I tell you for sure, I'm a Dane living in Sweden, and there is a resistance.
Oh, you're
going
Danish?
on. Yes, I'm Danish. There is a, you know, all this political talk is fine, but there is a different level on this. There is a different, just like the sheriff in Nottingham, fantastic. But there is also the show is full.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the hidden hand behind everything.
Yes.
I think we're starting to run out of time. I don't know what time it is. If anyone can tell me, that would be appreciated. 8:30. 8:30. Oh, then we're still okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you, by the way.
I have a question. It's about the new rules about the supplements in Sweden. Where can we read about these new rules?
Where can you read about what?
The new rules about the supplements in Sweden after 1st January.
Well, where could you read about them? I think you can go to our website, click on Government Affairs button, and then click on the international, either says International or European Union, I forget which. And you can go there, and there are some articles on the subject and links that can take you to various places. If you don't find it there, send me an email and I'll send you a link for it, okay? Yes. I'm glad you're here. You're asking a lot of questions.
I work as a teacher, and I told all my students that I'll be here today, so I'm going to get a lot of questions tomorrow, and they know that I have a somewhat different view of the world than what they normally. And they're going to, I'll be talking about this, and they'll say pretty much, well, why? Because they don't actually believe people could be so.
So you're going to be, just so I can repeat it, because I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Oh,
you're going to be meeting other people, and you'll be telling them about this.
My students will be asking me about this tomorrow, and I'll say, well, pretty much it's greed and power control. That's what drives the whole thing, to sort of make it understandable for a 13-year-old. And they'll, you know, say, I don't believe people could be so bad, not in our part of the world. I mean, you know, money doesn't buy all this. How would you describe the driving powers behind all this, if not just greed and power? What's the driving force?
What's another way to describe it? As its own kind of mental sickness, really. I mean, really, these people are mentally sick. They have this strange need to control other people's lives and other people. You know, they already are filthy rich. They have as much money as they really need. It's almost more for the power of it, the beauty of the power, in fact, that they can control it. And also they might have some sort of obscure view that they're making the world better. They mentally justify it that way. I don't know. I'm not in their heads, but you know, they're the ones after money and they're the ones after power. So I'd say power and money, and both in some cases.
And how does their argumentation go? What's the good thing about it? How do they sell this to governments?
Well, they just use the old, you know, they use patriotism, they use protecting the consumer, doing what's right for the poor guy. You know, it's all couched in this sort of thing. They're going to have this meeting next, when is it? This month or next month in Copenhagen with the Global Summit, you know, and they're going to use that to shove their agenda down the throats of the world, just to transfer money from the rich. It's really a redistribution scheme. Transfer money from the rich West to the poor third world, but it's not going to the poor third world, really. It's going from the poor people in the rich countries to the rich people in the poor countries. I mean, that's really what foreign aid is. It just goes to the corrupt politicians in Africa and Asia. It doesn't go to really help the poor people there. That's the sad part about international aid these days, unless you're doing it through INGOs, direct to the consumer or the person. It's being filtered through. That's why you have rich Congolese running down people on the streets in their big Mercedes in France, and then getting immunity from it, and squirreling away all their money in Swiss bank accounts. You know, it's just, you know, it's really power, and this is one way they're going to do it with the Copenhagen Summit, and they'll do it through other ways too. So, yes, sir.
So please, your comment on the origins of the Codex Alimentarius, the statement made that Codex was originally thought out by the head of IG Farben, also IG Auschwitz.
Well, you know, I haven't seen any proof to that. I've heard that argument made, and the fact that I haven't seen proof to it doesn't mean proof doesn't exist. But I haven't seen adequate proof on that. I think, actually, whether it was started out that way or not, most of the people in the Codex process are actually pretty decent people. I mean, I interact with the FAO staff, and they've been very helpful to us. They don't have an axe to grind. They don't try to do things to us. Where I see problems are usually in the country delegations or the sponsoring country head, like this Dr. Rolf Grossklass, who has his own agenda, and people like that. But FAO especially, most of them are pretty decent people. You know, the Secretariat and all of that. Don't really have anything against them. Sorry, the WHO is a little bit of a different story. They're very pro-drug. Excuse me, they're very anti-health.
But specifically, historically, who founded Codex?
I know. Well, I think it was founded by more than just that group. I think it was founded by a large number of people. Who put the bug in the ear to get it founded, I couldn't really say. I mean, who got the original idea? Maybe it was one of those people, but it almost is irrelevant because the people who took it forward are not those people. So there are some good things that Codex has done. I mean, there are great things, but in establishing some standards that some third world countries would never have, you know, in basic, like mineral waters and things like that. So it's not all bad, you know, it's like a lot of things, it's not all bad, but so I think whether it was founded by a former Nazi or not is almost irrelevant because it's been taken forward by a large, diverse group of people. Yes, sir? We have to stop? Okay. We have to stop. We've been given the order. This is it. So thank you all. I'm very in awe of you for coming out and doing this and being here, because it means you really are thoughtful, thinking, sentient human beings. So thank you.